And welcome everyone to our new Senate facility, at least for this meeting. We'll see how it works. It's very nice to be able to be here today, and we thank the library for making this room available for us. One of the reasons we chose it is because of its increased technological capacity. It makes it a lot easier to film and also to use the screens and so forth and so on. Everything's already set up. May I hear an approval to, may I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the March 7th meeting? Any discussion before we do? Take a vote? No? No objections? Okay, do I hear a motion to vote? Second? Great. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Abstain? Okay. The minutes are approved. And now we welcome Lorraine Davis to give the State of the University address today. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you. So here I am again. Bob is out of town again. I think he no, he's not avoiding you. He had other business that he needed to take care of the last minute. And so I'm happy to be here and bring you some information about some of the topics that are going on. Last meeting, I remember we talked about the OUS achievement compacts, and we had two members of the OEIB board here talking about that process and those compacts and metrics. That was Mary Spieldy and Nancy Golden. And we had a good interchange related to those. There's been quite a bit that's happened since then. As you all know, these compacts are a part of the OEIB, the Oregon Education Investment Board, and they are the ones that negotiate and oversee the achievement compacts. We have been in the process for a couple of years of developing achievement compacts, both mission-specific as well as those for the system, and you saw many of those, or at least where they were at the last Senate meeting. Those were approved with some minor changes by the Oregon State Board of Higher Education, and then they were taken and delivered to the OEIB, who also initially approved them, but then as they looked at the specific metrics a little more closely, and Tim Nesbitt took over the role in the governor's office of being the point person on those. They went through some changes, and a lot of this has to do with how much those metrics relate to 40-40-20. You've heard that mantra before in terms of the expectations within the state in terms of education, all the way from the pre through 20. So these achievement compacts are all kind of in line to how those things are going to be accomplished. What that has resulted in is that the metrics that will be used, at least at this point, the metrics, these are still kind of a work in progress. The metrics that will be used, every institution in the state will have identical metrics for the OEIB. We will have those metrics plus those that were approved by the state board to be the metrics for the University of Oregon and our obligations and responsibility to OUS within the system. So those metrics will still be used. Those that every institution in the state will have are number of bachelor's degrees awarded to Oregonians, number of bachelor's degrees awarded to rural Oregonians, number of advanced degrees awarded to Oregonians, and you get the flavor here that this is related to what's happening in Oregon and how it relates to the 40-40-20. In terms of quality, the number of graduates unemployed in Oregon compared with the percent of workforce unemployed in Oregon, employer satisfaction, alumni satisfaction, and then in terms of connections, number and percent of newly admitted Oregon freshmen entering with high school dual credit or other early college credit, and number of bachelor's degrees awarded to transfer students from Oregon community colleges. Every institution will have those metrics. Now, most of those are not different from those that we had in our original metrics. We had some more that were institution specific, and we also had more than that all of the institutions, or at least most of the institutions, were measuring. One of the metrics that came off the list for the OEIB as of last Thursday was research. And the understanding at that time was that research, that metrics, which is an important one for us as a research university, would go to the Economic Development Board for inclusion there. I've just learned from the Chancellor that those are back on the metrics now for everybody within the system. So, just for the research, okay, just for the three? Okay. Well, we're part of that and we like it. that has been acknowledged as, it was acknowledged as important before. It was going to economic development, and which we, of course, would argue, if that's the only place it could be, we'd probably say fine, but really research is integral to our mission as an educational institution, and it's not just about research as it relates to economic development. Even though my expectations were that they would look at that broadly, it fits better under the mission of the institution, period. And that's where it ought to be, and it ought to be an important metrics for us to have. And so I'm pleased with this at one level. We hope that it might be have results from a financial perspective, but one never knows. The other thing to say about the metrics in the new model, in addition to the fact that it meets 40-40-20, is that two important components of every metric will be measured, and that's the number of disadvantaged students and the number of Pell Grant students that are reached within each of the metrics. So it's a matter of being sure that in addition to we had the rural Oregon piece, that the broad diversity of representation in our, not just our student body, but in those that graduate is identified, and that we are being successful in delivering that. And then the percentage of Pell Grants, which might be an overlap, because somebody could be a Pell Grant recipient and also a member of one of the minority disadvantaged students defined by the Pell Grant. But it's to make sure that we are accessible to Oregonians for those that qualify at the institution. So that's an update on the OUS compact, the OEIB, I should say, the OEIB compact metrics. And because we'd spent quite a bit of time on those last time, and I know that your president went to the OEIB board and had some discussions about how faculty could be involved in the determination of those. I thought I would give you an update on that. Another item that we are, I think I brought, if I didn't bring this up last time, you might have heard about it, is the Oregon IDEA. And these have evolved into legislative packages. somewhat similar to legislative packages like we had. This would be for additional or special funding from the legislature related to particular opportunities that we have and want to present. This is basically processed through the Academic Strategies Committee as a part of the OUS board. The metrics that, or I mean the ideas or the concepts that we will be submitting for further examination to determine if they will go forward for potential special legislative funding are Pathways Oregon, and as you know, that's our program to provide enough support either through grants or scholarships or our own resources so that Oregonian students who meet the requirements to be a student here at the University of Oregon will be fully funded. And we're participating right now in 1,100 students that are in that program. Just to give you a perspective of who they are, the median family income for those students is $28,000. So we're meeting a real need there from an accessibility perspective. So we want to be sure that this proposal will help us hopefully continue that program. We also have a proposal on STEM education. We have a proposal on sustainable cities. We have a proposal on global Oregon. And we have a proposal on green product design as ideas that hopefully can get some special funding. So before I go on to anything else, are there questions about that process or matters there? Okay. The other, because I have to leave right after my presentation for a 3:30 meeting, I want to make a couple of comments about the emeritus policy that you're going to talk about a little bit later in the agenda. And this has been a long process, as you all know. I'm not trying to avoid the issue. That's why I want to say some things now and head out and exit. It is important that, there's been a faculty group that has worked on this for a long time, and it is important that we understand how we provide that status to the deserving people, faculty, so that they have that recognition that is so important for them. There were kind of 3 stickler points along the way, and one was whether the policy should apply to just full professors or associate professors included. I'm fully supportive of it being granted to associate professors. I've done that, and we've done that in the past. Personally, I see no reason not to do that. These are decisions you'll be making as a body. As far as removing or denying emeritus status, if I looked at that piece a little carefully, I could quibble about the wording. I'm not going to. The likelihood that that's going to happen, hopefully it'll never happen. But if it does, I'm not in conflict with what's currently in the policy. The other issue of discussion has been the parking. And I quibbled about the word free parking for a couple of reasons, and I just want to mention those. I would be willing to, or my support or my suggestion would be to make it free or subsidized parking, because it's not truly free in the fact that every retired person that gets the free parking pass has to be paid for by somebody. And currently that's paid centrally. This year we have 266 tags. So in our next year's budget, as an institution, we have budgeted for $90,000 for those passes. Now, in some people's minds, that's a small amount to recognize and offer our retirees the opportunity of providing them with access to campus to continue to make meaningful contributions to the institution. And certainly we don't want to disenfranchise those faculty members and retirees who have given so much of their time and energy to what this institution is. So I don't want to disenfranchise those. I just believe it's more appropriate to call it subsidized parking. That's just my suggestion. I'll never forget higher ed boot camps, administrative boot camps, where they say two things are important for you to remember. One, never get involved in parking. And the second is make sure that on space allocation, if you get involved and need to get involved, understand that you've made the right decision when nobody's pleased with what you've decided in terms of space. Well, I guess I've violated those premises of higher ed administration. And in that process, though, let me say that I leave it up to this body to decide what wordings you want. I will approve those, unless there's something crazy that you're going to do besides what's in the policy right now. But I will tell you that Jamie and I, the Vice President for Finance Administration, we are going to put together a small advisory group to discuss the ways in which we can process these the parking situation, because in drilling down in the weeds, which I really didn't want to do, but did, I've learned that there are many things about the way in which that parking process is managed that I think needs to be taken a look at. Particularly, there's one web page that says that if you're a retiree, you can get 2 parking passes. And indeed, looking at it, there are people that have 2 parking passes. There are a couple other kinds of things that I would probably put into place in the process and procedures, but I'd want to have the committee advise that, is that people, when they declare that yes, they are indeed eligible for the parking, the subsidized parking, that they are using it for their own use, and that they sign off on that. Because one of the things that I happen to know that is occurring is that people are getting their parking passes and giving them to other people to use, and that's not the intent of this privilege. And this is a privilege. It's not a right, it's a privilege. And so I just wanted to say that the policy shouldn't deal with all these mechanics. And it doesn't, and it shouldn't. But I just wanted to let you know that I would be, Jamie and I will be putting together an advisory group which will hopefully clean up some of the things that we've discovered in the process of looking at this, and to have the procedure and process be more in line with what it ought to be, but we'll take the advice of a group that will appoint in that regard. So I wanted to make those statements about that policy, since I am not able to stay. Just so you know, out of the 266 people that have those parking passes now, 145 are emeritus, 28 are other faculty, 44 are OAs, 29 are classified, and 20 didn't fit in any of the categories above for some reason. Maybe they're research faculty retirees. I'm not sure, but that's the breakdown that I have. So it's a larger issue. You aren't dealing with that part of it, but nonetheless, that's how those things have been arrived at. So, questions before I head out? Yes, Randy.
I have two questions. The university administration has frequently averred that it will maintain a neutral stance with regard to the faculty unionization process, but it recently filed an objection to the proposed bargaining unit with the Oregon Employment Relations Board. Participation in the definition of the bargaining unit is either a neutral act on the part of the university administration, or it is not. If it is a neutral act, and it has always been so, open discussions and negotiations regarding the nature of the bargaining unit have been going on for more than a year. Why, the question, why would the administration weigh in at the 11th hour when such a move smacks of anti-union obstructionism? On the other hand, if the participation in the definition of the bargaining unit is not a neutral act, when does the administration change its policy from one of neutrality to one of anti-union activism, and why?
Okay. Let me present what I believe to be responsive to your question. Whether or not the University of Oregon has a union is a decision of the faculty. And I do believe that administratively we are staying neutral on that faculty decision. We have objected to the definition of the bargaining unit as the proposed bargaining unit as it has been presented. And we have done that based primarily on our belief of how units could be managed within that and a community of interest, as well as the number of primarily our tenure track faculty or tenure-related faculty who have not felt that their input has been appropriately delivered. So, we did not have either the responsibility or have it be appropriate for us to intervene until we knew what the proposed bargaining unit was and that. Well, not that I knew about or to my knowledge, and I'm not sure that's the case, but I'm not going to respond further at this point. You bet. Okay.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. We appreciate your comments today. May I ask if somebody is questioning, please do not badger somebody who is standing here. That was really inappropriate. We can't have this kind of behavior. We must have respectful dialogue. And I will ask, you were badgering the person standing here, and that's not appropriate. It has nothing to do with the union. I'm going to ask everybody to please communicate appropriately. And don't interrupt someone who's giving a response in the middle of their response. We know that the union is a hot-button issue on the campus. But there are a lot of people who are still confused about many things. We know the process has been going on for a long time. Confusion might be right, it might be wrong. I'm not making any judgments here. I'm saying that it's not as simple as it might seem, and we're now in a process where it will be put into the hands of, I guess, lawyers and those who will look at the situation for what it is. But as far as the Senate goes and what we're doing here, we have to have respectful dialogue. We can't badger somebody who is trying to give an honest response. Thank you. And it's fine to ask the question, but just don't badger. Well, see, that's not helpful. That's not respectful, and it's not helpful. And I would like to see a Senate that has respectful dialogue. Our next agenda point is the open discussion with Chancellor George Pernsteiner on the presidential search. George.
Thank you, President Kier. Thank you, all of you, for inviting me to be here today. I appreciate that very much. We are in the sort of the stage of the search where we are trying to build the pool. The search committee now has been constituted, and it has met a couple of times. We'll be meeting again soon, and we'll begin to review the files of those who either have been put forward or have put themselves forward to be president of the university. In addition, this morning, the Advisory Review Committee met for the first time. That is the group that we formed after consultation with you and your executive committee about how to bring to bear in the process the ideas about what it means to you as faculty and to you as students to have a president who understands the academic quality of the education and research enterprise, both from the perspective of the faculty and the perspective of the students. We asked for recommendations from the Senate President and from the ASUO and from the Student Senate as to who should sit on this group, and we received many, and we now have 16 people, 8 faculty and 8 students, who are going to be reviewing the applications with an eye towards that each candidate's academic background and each candidate's commitment to academic quality, be it instruction or research, and to student success. I mentioned that we are in the let's build the pool stage. That isn't going to last much longer. In order to meet the calendar that we have laid out, the search committee is going to have to begin very soon to make some judgments about the pool of candidates that is available or that have been put forward up till now. We will, of course, keep the search open until filled, which means others can come in. But what I'm encouraging you and other groups to do now is, if you have been thinking about either applying or nominating someone, please do it this week. We can't delay any longer and still hope to build the pool in time that we can make the schedule that we've laid out. So if you've been thinking about somebody and you just know that person would be the most outstanding president, please put that person's name forward at newpres@uoregon.edu, the website, and that will allow Kim Morrison of Diversified Search to contact that person and see if she or he is interested and willing to be part of the pool, so that the search committee can in fact consider that person if that person is willing. So I encourage you, if you've been thinking about somebody but haven't yet put it forward, please do so at newpres@uoregon.edu. I'm encouraged so far. We have quite a few names in the pool, but again, at this point, nobody has narrowed it down at all. So we're eager to see the process move ahead. But as we've said all along, we want the right president, not just one that we can hire on time. So we're going to continue to hold out for the best possible candidate, and hopefully we will have somebody in this pool and can hire by the time that the spring term ends. But as we've said before, if we don't find somebody acceptable by that period of time, we'll have to extend. Questions, comments? And again, if you have nominations or you wish to apply, newpres@uoregon.edu, and please do it this week. Is that it? Thank you.
I would just like to thank Chancellor Pernsteiner for the process that we're in now. It's really a very constructive process. I've been involved in various stages of it, as he mentioned, and I think we've really come a long way since December. I'm really feeling that we're building a new trust and a new confidence and a new working relationship that is really going forward in the way that we want at our university. And so I'd like to thank you so much for your partnership and collaboration in helping us to find the president that will be ideal for our university and for the whole system. Thanks so much. Now, the new business, we begin with a motion on IAC membership, and Glenn Waddell will present this. He is a member of the IAC.
Good afternoon. I'm Glenn Waddell, Economics. I am one of 2 Senate representatives on the IAC this year, the other being Nathan Tublitz, who would have been here acting in this role, but he's on sabbatical. Nathan is chairing this committee. Can you pull up that PDF I sent you, please? And my friendly parliamentarian is going to keep me on point here to make sure I don't go to the top of that, if you will. So the motion that we're going to put forward today is actually quite simple. The University of Oregon Senate will add 1 more student member to the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee. I don't think we need a seconder because this came out of committee. The committee in the vote, I think I had it on there, was 10 yes, 0 no, 1 abstained from that vote. I want to give you some background. Start small. This is to sort of support the motion, if you will. Here we have the current charge in the top that relates to the part of the membership of the committee that's student-related. And here we had the proposed language that was in a revised charge. Now I have to unpack this a little bit before asking anyone to vote on the merits of this motion, for better or worse, to try and sort of get everyone into the same context that we are in as a committee. So I don't want to read these, but you'll note, and I can just maybe highlight that the current membership, which I will show you in just a bit, consists of 5 students, and we're asking that that be increased to 6. The intent behind it, again, just to kind of give you some context for what we were thinking at the time, you can look at the, at least one of the 6 student members will be a varsity student athlete elected through the Student Athletic Advisory Committee. So that's new language there. Of course, the motion is simply to add, but that was our intent behind the addition, was to sort of go in this direction. The ASU president is here, and my understanding is that the floor will be his for a moment and can speak to some of the issues that are behind it as well. But roughly speaking, adding a student seems unobjectionable a priori. Some of the flavor of that was that they seem to be the members of the committee that are most constrained, being in classes and such. So bolstering that would not likely be costly and would sort of increase representation, if you will. And then also the nod toward having that be a SAC-led member. So from there, this is where I need to kind of unpack for you a little bit more information. So if you can go to the next slide. If you go to the Senate webpage, you'll find 2 things I'm going to walk through just very briefly if I can. One is to give you the current IAC membership so that you know what we're adding to. And on the same page, I'm going to pull up probably the easiest, most efficient way to give context for what we're voting on here, which is some correspondence that's been on the Senate webpage for some time, but I've learned in the classroom that the only way you can really guarantee that people have the context is to actually walk them through it. I'm going to try and be efficient. I'll read little excerpts from it just to make sure we're all, I think, sufficiently informed before we would call this to a vote. So I'll do these 2 now if you can. If you click on it, you should go there, but if you've got some other way to do that, that's fine. Okay, so here's the committee. Above this is the charge, but here's where the committee membership can be found. 17 plus, I think, 3 at the bottom, making it a total of 20 who are ex officio, 2 of which are non-voting. So there's the membership. It's as you might expect, but the committee is that size, so that gives you some, again, context for what we're adding to, going from 5 to 6. And then in this list here of reports, there's I think it's a 10 or so page. I've got a copy of it here that I'm going to kind of use to get myself through it. There's a 10 or so page back and forth here that is probably the most efficient way of providing context for what you're about to consider voting on. So the short version of this is that, actually, let me read the first paragraph here, if you will. This is an email that sort of starts this correspondence from Interim President Berdahl to the IAC through Nathan Tublitz as its chair. First paragraph, I think, is kind of the highlight of this one anyways. I've received copies of proposed changes in the charge of the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee. In his view, I'm going to try not to paraphrase this, but I want to also kind of move us through it quickly if I can, so excuse me if I step over things that catch your eye and you want to discuss them, that's fine. President Berdahl is suggesting here they're substantial, proposing to alter the fundamental responsibilities. Oversight is a key word here, advisory versus oversight, that will become a theme. That's an open question, I suppose, is the interpretation of some of these words, so hopefully we can unpack that very quickly. I think it's best, therefore, for me to inform the committee before discussions of these changes go any further that I cannot and will not accept the changes proposed. And it goes on to detail a couple of the other things, and we'll go down here, including this bottom paragraph right now. I believe the Director of Intercollegiate Athletics should meet with the IAC once per term to discuss with the IAC those issues that appropriately fall within its purview. We meet roughly once a month, and Rob Mullins, as Athletic Director, has been a participant in those meetings subject to this change. Prior to this change, this is something that we're, I guess, ongoing in our interpretation of. Then we have, again, this is the start of the back and forth, which I'm going to try and skip over. So a couple days later, acting as chair, Nathan Tublitz replies or forwards this information to the committee at large. In terms of timing, we've already voted. Okay? 10 yes, 0 no, 1 abstained. This is all subsequent to that vote. Okay? So we didn't have this context when we voted. You will. We then have a 24 January, back to Nathan Tublitz as chair from Bob Berdahl. I have said repeatedly that I will not accept any change in the IAC charge. To discuss this further is a waste of everyone's time. Please drop it from the agenda. Nathan replies with some context for the setting up of charges and such. And I'm going to start skipping through here a little bit faster. I think it's page 4 on I think it's above this. This is a key paragraph, and then we can probably be done with this. Number 5 at the bottom here. This pertains to the motion that's actually being considered now. Again, this is Nathan Tublitz to the this is President Berdahl to Nathan Tublitz as chair, to then be circulated through the committee. Number 5, I note from the agenda that you are requesting a change in the membership of the committee. I remind you of my previous notification that I will not entertain changes in the committee charge. Okay. And I think for the most part, that brings us kind of, without going into any more of the details, through that document. At the end of that document, if you're interested, you can find the changes that were proposed, one of which was the membership, but there are others as well. To unpack the context, I think, for those changes, if we can, we go to that, go back to the PDF that I had sent you. And there, what I've done is just to sort of like one small indication below this. This is a report. This is around the same time as the task force that maybe you've heard of floating about in terms of the charge, at least from the Senate president. One of the charges we were given as a committee was to kind of revisit this task force, which since 2004 really hasn't been acted on. There are nuts and bolts in there that I won't go into the details of, but you can imagine there are certain tasks that were laid out. You know, we replenish this committee with new people, and they ask what's been done, and nothing's been done. That's the nature of it in a nutshell. Around the same period, there's this self-study instrument, and this is just to sort of give context to maybe the bigger picture of what is oversight versus advisory and such, and I think it's an open question. The next page on here, this is just pulling out of that report. The top is kind of NCAA-led question type thing that an institution would choose to respond to. In that response is not just the IAC charge and description, but other elements of decision-making authority within the institution. All I've done here is grab the IAC. If you go down one more, I'm going to highlight that part of this communication back to the NCAA is that the IAC also provide faculty and student oversight and input into the Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. Just sort of but one example of the kind of noise, I guess, that's out there in the system that as members we're trying to learn about. This in the documents I've gone through here is another kind of source of noise, I think. That I think is at this point sufficient for you to be informed in your vote on what we're continuing to then put before the Senate, which is the simple notion, if you go down one more, that the University of Oregon Senate will add one more student member to the IAC.
Would anybody like to place the motion? Somebody place the motion and have a second, please. No? We don't need to do that? So moved. Okay, because I'd like to call for discussion now. Great. Anybody have anything to say? Questions for Glenn or any comments? Did everyone follow what was being said about the back and forth and so forth? Ben, would you like to make a statement? If you could go to the microphone, identify yourself, please.
I'm Ben Eckstein, and I'm the student body president, and I am also a member of the Intercollegiate Athletic Committee. I appointed myself this year among the 5 student members who are appointed, and I just wanted to give even more context to the reason that students support this, and I will point out that all of these student members of the IAC voted in favor of this change in membership. And at the beginning of the year, there was an election for the chair of the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee, and it was probably one of the more contentious university committee elections that took place. And during the course of that election process, students asked the candidates for chair at that time, which was at the end of the summer, beginning of fall, if they would support adding a student member. And Nathan Tublitz, who is our chair of the committee, had said at that time as part of his candidacy, yes, I would absolutely support it, and I believe that students should push this through. And so that's what we did. Students on the IAC continued to advocate for an additional member, and we really do believe that, especially given the level of dialogue and debate around issues of athletic department transparency and finances and contributions back to the academic mission of the university, that it's a very important committee for students, and one where adding a student member could really only reap benefits. And so we strongly supported, I strongly supported on behalf of all students at the university and on behalf of the students on the IAC. And I would also add that in particular, the membership addition is not just adding one student member, but it makes the ASUO president or designee an ex officio. And I think that part of the benefit of that is that the ASUO does invest over $1.6 million annually in the athletic department for access to student tickets. And so there's a particular interest that the ASUO as a representative organization of students has in having an additional voice on this committee to be able to have engagement and dialogue with the athletic department that we fund $1.6 million of. So I strongly support the change, and I think it's good for students and good for the Intercollegiate Athletic Committee and good for continuing to strengthen the relationship between our athletic department and the academic mission of the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any other comments or questions? Please.
I'm Sonia Runberg, a senator on behalf of Officers of Administration. It seems like the more appropriate route to have this motion go forward is to actually have this discussion go to the Committee on Committees. So can I make a motion to have this go? What? I think it's more appropriate for this motion or this activity to go through the Committee on Committees, the Senate Committee on Committees. I think that's the appropriate protocol.
A motion to refer needs to be made if this is to be discussed. Do I hear a motion to refer?
Can I make that motion? I make that motion.
Can she make that motion? Our parliamentarian needs to
I know.
give us, yeah, thank you. Yes, you made that motion. Does it have to be seconded? It needs a second. Do I hear a second? Go. Second for the purpose of discussion. So we now open a period of discussion about the motion. Would you please restate the motion for us as you made it? Thank you, Sonia. Just so we're all clear.
The motion is to, refer this matter to the UO Senate Committee on Committees.
Great.
Because I believe it should go to them because they are the Committee on Committees. They are the ones who should be making these decisions or considering these decisions, considering these options.
Please, anybody who would like to comment, please
Yeah.
feel free to come up to the microphone.
It seems rather arbitrary for a committee to make a motion to add to their committee. The Committee on Committees is responsible for the discussion and the composition of a committee. It seems removed and fragmented.
I guess at this point we need some background, which I guess only I can supply, is that last year we were in what's called the 10-year review period of all committees. And all committees were asked to make a report and to review their committee given certain criteria. So each committee had the option of requesting more members, giving a rationale, asking for a revision of the charge, supplying some kind of language that they would like to be considered, so forth and so on. And that went before the Committee on Committees, and we looked at what was submitted by not all of the committees. Not everybody finished it. It's a pretty demanding process. And we concluded that we would extend it by another year because we needed time to look at these things. And so it was supposed to be finished by this May, but of course you know something happened in November that set us on a different track. And then once we had the appointment of our interim, Bob asked me to please not go forward with that because he didn't want to saddle a new president with something that he had made decisions on that wouldn't be appropriate for that new person. So I agreed with him and I said, okay, we will stop the tenure review process and I'll extend it by another year into the tenure of the new president. So we haven't proceeded with it. There have been some committees that have asked for a change or they had an idea that they wanted to discuss, and we've done that. But the IAC had a particular need related to the ideas that have just been presented, and so they went forward with it. It's a little more complicated than that because before all of what I just said happened, there was another set of issues in the IAC, and the outcome of that was that I asked the IAC, and that would be Nathan Tuplitz, the newly elected chair, to review the 2004 task force, which Glenn referred to, and to look at those points because they hadn't really, some of them at least, hadn't been addressed and needed to be looked at. It was a very well-written report in 2004 with a lot of good suggestions, and it behooved us to take another look at it and to see what progress we had made. Committee agreed to do that, and then I also said, would you please take a look at your charge, and because there had been some issues inside of the committee where that needed to be done. And so the committee doing this really came out of my request. Then we had the firing. The committee went forward, and then in the middle of that and all of this correspondence, we got into the feedback loop of what you've just experienced and scrolling down the page. So we're somewhere in the middle of that, and we can choose today to vote on this motion that's been put before us, just adding the one member, or Sonia now is asking us to refer it through the motion to the Committee on Committees. We really can go either way with it. There will be a 10th year review that will continue into the tenure of the new president, and that's the background. Yes, please, if you'd come to the microphone. Oh, it's coming to you. That's good.
Dean Walton, University Libraries. Bob, with your work with the Committee on Committees, did you feel it was that group's job to evaluate whether or not another committee needed to have another person added to it?
Well, the truth is that we were asking the committees to provide information to us so that we could review it and take a look at it.
And then who was going to make the decision at that point?
And then we would engage in discussions with each committee. And in effect, that's what I was doing with IAC at the beginning of this year. And then, of course, events took a turn that made us actually not continue that, because we were asked really not to continue it. And I think for good reasons. I think Bob Berdahl, he really does not want to saddle a new president with anything that that president might not agree with. That's his rationale. But I think the committee has a different view of that and feels that their work would be better done if this could go forward. So really what we're seeing is one view counterposed against another, and they're at the moment not reconciled. And so as a Senate, we need to decide how we're going to proceed. Now, any committee, by the way, can ask for a change to their charge or a change to their membership at any time. It doesn't have to be in a 10th-year review period. But I wanted to give you the background about how this particular set of circumstances evolved. And it is confusing, but you should all know that. Yes.
Rob, I'm not a member of the Senate, so I'd like to ask permission to speak.
Yes, please.
Granted?
Granted.
I'm Dave Hubin, Senior Assistant to the President, and I have actually had either the honor, or I don't know how you would describe it, of serving on the Committee on Committees for 21 years. So I'm thoroughly discredited. I should just sit down. The Committee on Committees has a ludicrous name, just as the Policy on Policies does and Major does in Catch-22. But it actually has a very important potential function. In the year 2001, I participated with three very active and energized and important faculty members, Nathan Tublitz, Ann Teddards, and Randall McGowan, in a complete revision to our committee structure. And I don't want to dwell on the early years of my 21-year experience, but committees have at times been out of alignment with what the Senate should be, I think in its own mind, and I don't mean that in a prescriptive way, should be doing. At times there have been committees that have not been the viable points of referral for legislation if something comes up. And I'll give you a quick anecdote. There was a period of time, I came in to President Brand's office in 1991 and learned that I was responsible for being the President's liaison to the Committee on Committees. And I learned that there were two kinds of committees. There were faculty committees and administrative committees. Now, that made sense, but 3 or 4 years earlier, the faculty committees had been renamed academic committees. And so what I found out in my first couple of weeks sitting in Miles Brand's office as a one-year sabbatical replacement, I learned that we had standing committees A and standing committees A. Standing committees academic, standing committees administrative, not to be confused with each other. And actually there was a period of time where we dealt with that, and then it was President Tublitz, who chaired the Committee on Committees, President Ann Teddards, Randall McGowan, who we said we need to look at our committee structure and make sure it aligns with how we want to engage students. We have engaged students quite appropriately and effectively since 1972, actually 1971 in one of the committees. How we want to engage students, how we want to interact with ASUO. We wanted in that year, that review at the, I'm going to call it the review at the turn of the century. There's nothing about me that wants to aggrandize this. What we wanted to do was, at that time, bring our committee structure into alignment with the then form of shared governance. And the group, Professor McGowan, Professor Tublitz, and Teddards, but more important, we were just a working group. The Senate at that time then received the report of this committee to reform committees. My God. That's one step more bizarre than committee on committees. But they received that report and they said, this is important, and what we need to do is on a regular basis examine our committee structure, both for charge and for membership, to look at balance, to look at potential gaps. I mean, is there a need right now for a committee on academic freedom? We don't have one. Is there a need right now for a committee on the academic plan? We don't have one. I'm not standing here trying to prescribe that there be such, but the agreement was at the turn of the century, the 21st century. I need to tell you something that this shows how the synapses fire. We're entering the 100th year anniversary of the Committee on Committees. And I've served for 1/5 of that time. I want to say committees can be important. Committees are important. They're important to a legislative body if they align right. And so I want to make a case, and I am reflecting President Berdahl's sentiment here, that our committee structure needs reexamination. There should be legislation that comes before the Senate, and then there would be a logical committee to refer it to, and that committee would come back with a recommendation. We have a mismatch at times. Now, what President Berdahl is saying is we now have a constitution, which I hope all of us value. I know he does. I know I value it fervently. Many of you sat in the room with me as we worked on it. We need to examine our committee structure in a thoughtful way within the Committee on Committees, in a quick turnaround. This shouldn't go on forever. And then bring back the proposals in aggregate to this body for approval. The Committee on Committees doesn't change a committee's charge or membership. You do. And I guess what I'm doing is speaking to the extent that I'm allowed in support of the motion to refer to the Committee on Committees, for them to, this motion of the single addition of a student, for them to bring it back, the Committee on Committees, to this body. Is the 6th student on the Intercollegiate Athletic Committee the right thing to do? May very well be. Should we expand the Senate Transparency Committee to add students? I happen to believe we should. But I believe that should be taken to the Committee on Committees. Do we need a committee on academic planning within the Senate, a standing committee? I happen to believe we should. What should the student membership be? I guess what I will summarize to defer, although I'm not the person who calls on him, to John Bonine, but I see an interest in speaking, and it's always good. I hope that we would refer this to committee, not with prejudice, and certainly not with an impulse to stall it, but to say an important issue has been raised by one of our committees. Do we want to add this student? And I've heard cases for the merit of it. Ben makes the case that ASUO has money in it. Let's have our Committee on Committees advise us on that at a time certain, and not just say sometime in the distant future. So I know I can't call on John Bonine.
So just a brief question. I'm not understanding whether you're connecting the request of the IAC to add one student member to the function of the Committee on Committees. Are you saying that the function of the Committee on Committees depends on whether we today vote as a Senate on this? I mean, is this a watershed issue for us?
My suggestion would be that there always ought to be a direct path for a standing committee of the University Senate, the IAC, Senate Transparency Committee, or whatever, to bring an issue directly to the Senate.
So you're asking that every committee issue from hereforth on go through the Committee on Committees? I'm trying to understand the implications of what you're saying because they're broad and they're deep, if I'm understanding you.
Yeah, well, and I guess it's a question of legislative protocol in one sense. My contention would be that if a committee were to bring forward we want an additional member of the social science faculty sitting on the Committee on Courses, that's legitimate for that committee to bring it to the Senate. My suggestion to our Senate, and I don't mean to be presumptuous because I'm speaking at your pleasure, my suggestion would be that should such a motion come, that we need another social scientist on the Committee on Courses, that would immediately go to the Committee on Committees for a quick recommendation back in the sense of what is the overall context. We've gotten a very eloquent and I think informative discussion of the IAC, and that helps. It puts in context this question of the narrow question of one student. But I would suggest that even there, it's best that it be referred to the Committee on Committees for discussion with a time certain to bring it back to say the Committee on Committees concurs or dissents or doesn't or recommends for this or against it. So I do believe that there's a role in when a matter of committees comes before this body, there's a role for the Committee on Committees.
You're saying it should go first to the Committee on Committees, then to the Senate.
The Senate is always the dispositive voice. The Committee
Okay.
on Committees is an organ of the Senate, appointed by the Senate and the Senate executive, and it's the Senate who...
Okay, so that's your proposal as to how we should proceed.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
mean, that's what I would consider to be the motion to refer to committee. I would consider that to be the rationale for referring this motion of this single narrow task to our committee that addresses concerns of committees.
Yes, and I see three hands. John Bonin first. There was another hand, and then Randy Sullivan, and then Ben. Was there another person there? No. Please, John.
Thank
And
you.
then Randy,
with all
and then Ben.
due respect to Dave Hubin, I think he's made the point that the Committee of Committees already has a function and has to do a periodic review. And I do believe that this proposal to refer this to the Committee on Committees is a watershed moment in which a new policy is being proposed that no such motions may be brought before the Senate without first going through the Committee on Committees. While that may be something we should consider, I think we should note that that is what's happening here. And since we have not had that procedure until now, I plan to vote no on the motion to refer. Then I invite, however, those who are interested in that to propose a motion that indeed, and with proper notice so we could spend perhaps the next meeting discuss it, propose a motion that all such changes go to the Committee on Committees. I mean, I would like that to be discussed as an issue if that's important to people, but not to suddenly change things, change the horse in midstream. So my current position would be to vote against the motion to refer, but to be open to the idea if somebody wants to bring it in the regular order.
On the floor. Correct. Randy Sullivan's next, then Ben Eckstein, then Frank Stahl.
Procedurally, I think what's happening is the correct way to do it. When it comes to the floor and we decide that it has to do not just about a committee, that's very vague terms, about the composition and responsibilities of a committee, it's certainly advisable to refer it to the Committee on Committees. I think bringing it to the floor and then referral is a good way for that to happen. I think that what we're seeing is a precedent, not a binding precedent, but a precedent with power. And I think that's good. But also, for the people who are supporting the original motion, might I suggest to you politically that it is not a bad thing, because right now you're have a change in a committee, a recommendation of that committee going to a president who is hostile to the change, it seems. If it comes out, you're taking a gamble. If it goes to the Committee on Committee and comes out with a recommendation and it gets passed, then it has a lot more clout, and it may be coming out eventually to a president, a different president who might be more receptive to it. So there may be some political advantages to going with this, though it's always frustrating when things get delayed, I know.
Thank you. No, Ben was next, and then Frank. And then Glenn.
I just wanted to speak against as well the motion to refer, and I guess first I would say that there's nothing, no action that we take today to advance a motion from the IAC to add a student member would preclude the Committee on Committees from doing the work that Dave Hubin described and from conducting that kind of review and having that kind of dialogue. But I don't think that we should delay or stall what could be a very positive action that our University Senate takes, an action that is responsive to the interests and the needs of a variety of constituents on the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee that was unanimously passed by them, just because we have this committee on committees that could also conduct that review. And I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. I think that we have an opportunity today to move forward a change that is good for our campus community and good for students, and something that the IAC wants and has brought to us today. And so I very much believe that we should support it and move it through. And I also want to make the point that whether the intent of referring to the committee on committees would be to stall or to pass it along with prejudice, that is what we would be doing. We would be stalling this. I would be almost certain this would not come back to the University Senate this year, and that many of the student leaders especially who worked very hard this year to push for this change won't even be here by the time it comes back around, and all the incentive and all the motivation to get this passed and get this through will be gone. I understand that our interim president, who I respect very much, has a disagreement with us on this, but I think that our Constitution fortunately allows us a few different mechanisms and avenues to resolve that disagreement should it continue, and I think that the decision in front of the University Senate today is, do we support this change in membership, and do we want to see it move forward? Is it a good thing for our constituents? I think it will be good for students, and I think it'll make for an IAC that is better equipped to do its work of engaging in dialogue with the athletic department and representing university constituents in the goings-on of the athletic department. So I would very strongly encourage that we vote down the motion to refer to the Committee on Committees, and that we do approve this as a body and move it forward. And I'm not a university senator, so I cannot make any such motion, but I would encourage someone who comes after me to make that motion to call question on the motion on the table right now, so that we can move on to a vote on the membership change.
Frank Stahl, and then Glenn, and then Dev Singh, and then Emma.
I think Ben makes a persuasive argument, but and I don't doubt his motives at all, but I am concerned about the general issue of a committee being free to change its own composition without a careful consideration of how the committee system works. And that is, there will be occasions when a committee may find itself frustrated and feels that if they could alter its composition, they could bring about something they wanted to happen. That is, the change would be political and would depend on the winds of the moment. May I change my committee so that I can get this passed? And in general, I think as a matter of principle, not necessarily applicable to this situation, but in general, for a committee to change its own composition is subject, I'm afraid, to abuse, and I would think any such request ought to go to the Committee on Committees.
And I think John Bonine, am I interpreting you correctly that you mentioned that a motion could be made to build this into the system somehow? Was that future possibility? After we worked on this one, to look at this in detail, that was what he was saying. Next would be Glenn, and then Dev, and then Emma.
Just maybe to speak quickly to what Frank has offered, I think it's probably safe to say that nothing's getting done in the IAC. So a committee change, I don't think the intent is not that we get anything done. Just for the record, we're not thinking that this is going to be a magic bullet. I should preface this by suggesting I'm not speaking for Nathan, but I can hear his voice all the way from Europe, sort of suggesting that I raised the issue. And again, this comes from this dialogue that's been back and forth that I skipped over. But just very briefly, maybe I'll add some of the nature of that touched on our new Constitution. And this is by no means a litmus test, but we have a protocol for such things. My understanding, although I'll seek the advice of those with longer history than I have, my understanding is that this would be the first time that such a thing would have been sent to the Committee on Committees. And we have a protocol here to deal with these things that would give the interim president 60 days to respond were he to decide not to make this change. The long 10-page dialogue ends with Nathan telling the committee that after a sort of smaller meeting, that the agreement was that President Berdahl would follow up with a memo, and that would be circulated to the committee, making his point about how we should proceed. That memo has not appeared. We don't know what that, or at least I've not read such a memo. So that's the way that dialogue ended, but I think the point that was being made from the committee chair, IAC committee chair, was that we have a procedure in place where the president to decide not to do this.
Dev.
First, so Dev Sinha for mathematics. I'm not a senator, but speaking at your
Thank you.
pleasure. So with all due respect to David and his great history, let me try to restate what he said because I think I agree with it. If there's a matter that comes before the Senate that has to do with the campus, the physical grounds, the presumption is that it would go through the campus planning committee first. If there's a matter that has to do with awards, the presumption is it would go to that committee first. I think this is just, I don't see a need for a motion around that. This is just protocol acknowledging that none of us can be experts on everything, and that's why we have these committees. And I think David was stating the desire that in a campus this large and complex, you need enough committees to pretty much cover everything and have it kind of gone over by some other group in order for a generalist body such as this to have any hope of doing its work. So that's just a clarification there. Also, I wanted, since I'm also a member of the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee, I wanted to make a distinction between the changes in charge that the committee was proposing when President Berdahl first sent his email, which were significant, which talked about placing IAC members on search committees that hadn't been placed before and review of all decisions and things like that. And it was out of that folks got retrenched. If such a motion had perhaps come before, I don't know if President Berdahl would have taken, I can't speak for him, taken such a, well, I don't want you guys to change anything kind of view. So I don't know if this needs to be a watershed testing the back and forth between the Senate and the President. The President Berdahl's remarks were in regards to a fundamental change in the role of the IAC in its basically daily workings almost with the athletic department. So I wanted to clarify that. Though that original charge change was not voted on, the 10-0-1 vote was on this very small, simple matter. The other thing never came to a vote.
And Emma. Pardon? Oh, no, you had your hand up and I recognized you, and then I'd like to close discussion if possible. And
the stream won't be able to hear you.
I'm Emma Newman. I'm an ASUO senator. I also sit on the University Senate Executive Committee, so I've been in some of the communication around the IAC and bringing this motion forward. I am in full support of it and would like to see it move forward now. One thing that we struggle with as students is that we're only in our positions for a year, and there's a learning curve. So I think it's really important that if this change is to be made, it's made before the end of the school year, so that whichever student would be sitting in that position would be able to serve to their best of their ability for the following year. And back in, I was reading over meeting minutes of the Senate a long time ago. And in 1969, the IAC just directly moved to add 3 students to it in the University Senate during their meeting notes there. So this has been done in the past with this committee, same sort of motion. And I would urge us to vote this motion to move it to committee down.
thank you, Emma. First, we have the referral. We need to call that to a vote. Is that correct? Would be our next step. Do I hear a motion to do that, to call it to a vote? First, a second? Second? A roll call vote. Just call. A roll call vote. Okay. Yes. Yes. Paul, am I correct that if she calls for a roll call vote, we have to do that? Is that correct? In this case? I just want to make sure that we're doing it correctly. Yeah, that's what I'm, thank you, John. He was saying, is it the chair's discretion or is it a mandatory roll call vote? She's asking for a roll call vote, but is it, can she do that as the person who's? It can be requested, yes. Yes. Yes? Okay, it can. Then we go forward and, yes? Friendly amendment, our parliamentarian? Can we have a friendly amendment still? Friendly amendments are... What do you want to do? I was going to ask that we solidify the report that would come back to the committee on committees, say May, Senate meeting. Charge the report back in May. So you would charge the... So what I'd like to do, if possible, since we're having some very nice, open, respectful dialogue here, and the quickest way forward, since we have other business, would be to allow Glenn to place that for it to go to the Committee on Committees and come back in May. Is this what you're saying? I couldn't quite hear it all. So... he's moving to amend the motion to refer, to add a date for it to come back to this body. Yes. Okay, we need a second. It's a friendly amendment. Okay, so do I hear a second? All he's doing is putting a date on it. Second, thank you. Yes? Yes, first Senate meeting in May. May I call the vote? Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Abstain. Thank you very much. This was a wonderful discussion in my view, and we got some very good issues on the table and some things to follow up on, and we will do that. Thank you. Yes? Okay, now we vote on the motion. All in favor? Right, okay. So what are we voting on? Let's restate it so we all know. Yes? Yes, that we refer this motion to the Committee on Committees for a report that will be given the first Senate meeting in May. Are we all agreed that this is the motion? Yes. Ben? Yes, so if this is voted down, there's still a motion on the table. Okay, all in favor of what we just stated? Aye. We don't have to do a roll call vote. I think it's at the discretion. Yes, John. I would ask you in for the sake of time and the fact that we have a very important policy to look at and some other really important reports, to do by hand as opposed to roll call, which will take longer. Do you have a reason why you vastly prefer roll call as opposed to just do? She moved. Did anybody second? No. So if it's not seconded, I think that it's finished. Yes, just a regular vote. You're okay with that? And just, please.
Can a member, though, call for a division of the House by what Professor Mooney just called
Yes.
a hand vote?
Yes.
I mean, the member has that right.
Right. Oh, of course. Yeah, I was just asking what she would, and she could ask that. Yeah. A hand, either a hand vote, so or a voice vote, basically, is what that division of the House would be: the hand or the voice. Right. So in other words, voice if it's unclear, division and counting hands. Should we try the voice first? And if we think that it's not satisfactory, good. All in favor? Aye. Okay, let's state it again. Once more, it was to refer to Committee on Committees, the motion to be considered, and a report to be given at the first meeting in May. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Nay. Abstain. Call for a division. All in favor, hands. Nay, hands. Abstain. 1. So we have 16 yes, 6 no, and 1 abstain. Therefore, we refer it to Committee on Committees, and the report will be given first meeting in May. Thank you so much. I know this was complicated, but we need to do it right so that everybody is respected and honored in the process. Thank you so much. Now we move to our next point, the retirement and emeriti policy. John Nicols and Jim Mooney co-chairs, and Jim will be presenting this today. As you heard earlier from our Provost, this has been a policy that has received much discussion. We're very excited that it's before us today.
So I know the Senate has this fancy technology, but I took the liberty of sending around actual copies, hard copies. Just when I was in private practice, I got so used to handing things to the judge and to opposing counsel, and so maybe that'll be useful. The Senate will probably remember that about a year ago, we brought a slightly altered version of this to you. You enacted it kindly, unanimously, I'm told. I wasn't present because I, at that time, wasn't chair of the committee. We bring it back to you for reasons I'll try to explain briefly, with 2 relatively small changes, and hope that you will enact it once again. There are, as I said, 2 small changes, and if you happen to compare the 2 versions, you'll note that this newer one is pared down considerably. We just think in terms of form, it's far better than the one a year ago. So maybe something good has come out of this additional year. The first change has to do with parking, and Lorraine alluded to it. After you passed it a year ago, we all thought that our work was done. It turned out it was not. Months went by, and we then heard, several months after you acted, that the president objected to this and would not ratify it. And the reason given was because of the language in the final paragraph that said, the university will continue to provide free parking to emeritus faculty who are not any longer on the payroll. Now, this is something that, of course, the university has been doing for years and years, not only to emeritus faculty, but to all retired employees who are no longer on the payroll. We asked for an explanation, some citation of authority. None was forthcoming. And shortening up months and months of difficulty, what happened next was that last fall, our administrative convener of the committee brought the committee together to try to resolve this parking issue that seemed to be between the committee and the president's office. One member of our committee urged us to stand pat. You might guess it was my friend Frank Stahl. We call him the Bulldog. But the rest of the committee decided to play nice, and we changed the final paragraph of our proposal to you, and you can see it down there. It now says that the university will make every reasonable effort to continue granting to emeritus faculty free campus parking whenever they are not on the university payroll. The key language, of course, is not that the university will do this, but that the university will make every reasonable effort to do this. What could be more reasonable than that, people? All right. The second change is to be found in in the first paragraph of Part A. Does everybody have this? I mean, can we put it up just for fun? The history was this, very briefly. When the committee reconvened, we heard from one member of the history faculty that he had signed the usual papers agreeing to retire within 3 years. Thanks, great, perfect. That's good, that's it, yeah. He had done so very shortly after reaching full rank, being promoted to full professor, and therefore he would not meet, at the time of his retirement, the 5-year criterion that would give him virtually automatic emeritus status. He never actually said this, but the implication was that he would not have signed the papers at that time had he known about this policy that was about to go into effect. So he asked, in effect, for some kind of grandparent term to be added to this policy. We thought as a committee this was a sensible and fair thing to do, and so we did that. And you'll see at the end of the first paragraph, it now says, provided, however, that any faculty member retiring or contracting to retire before December 31, 2014 will not be subject to the 5-year requirement. We chose a date 3 years out from when we thought this would go into effect. It's now slightly less than 3 years, but we're confident it's going to pick up every person who might be affected. So those are really the only two substantive changes. You might wonder, indeed some committee members wonder, why it took so long and was so incredibly difficult, the interchanges with Johnson Hall and so forth, for us to come back with these two relatively minor changes. Hopefully I can spare you that unless somebody forces me to get into it. So concluding, I commend this to you for enactment once again.
Just like to thank Jim so much for his very hard work on this over the years, really, and also the other members of the committee. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Any discussion before we go to a vote? Yes. He needs a mic. A mic is coming. Let's run that mic over. please identify yourself.
Thank you. Jim, just in the last paragraph on the first page, the next to last line, is there a particular a reason for the word generally, rather than defining removal of emeritus status as any act that would justify dismissal? If there is, I'm fine, but if not, I'm just curious.
I don't know that there's a particularly good reason for that word, John. On the other hand, I don't see that it harms anything. It's defined generally. What it does, I think, to the extent that I thought about that word when I was cleaning this document up, it seemed sensible to me to leave a little bit more wiggle room for whichever person was making these decisions. So it's in.
So my question then would be, as a friendly amendment, whether you'd be willing to remove it. And the reason I'm asking for that is it seems to me that the end of a long and illustrious career, to have the decision to be made on some other grounds rather than the same grounds for removal of position or tenure, I can't think of that extra good reason. And, I'd like to
Yes, but there
things
might
down.
be one, of course.
Well, that's the reason why there also might be a bad reason.
Sure,
So,
sure. And the bulldog in the front row is nodding his assent.
To whom, you or me?
No, he's a.
Could I ask the bulldog to point?
He's agreeing with you.
Then if you won't make it friendly, I would like to move to remove the word.
No, it's fine with me. And John Nicols has left. Ernie is here. He doesn't care. Frank, I'm sure, is in favor of it, and George Rowe is. So, okay, we can delete the word generally.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. See how reasonable we are,
Thank God we have a law school. It's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so shall I call for a vote now to approve? Do I hear a motion to vote? First, second? All in favor, aye? No? Voting to vote. Okay, now we place the motion and vote. Sorry. Okay. And that is to approve this policy. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Abstain. Thank you so much. This is really a great victory. We're so glad. We've now passed one policy for each of the last two meetings, and we are going to do the same and more in May. So many to be coming before you then. Thank you, Jim. Let's give him a round of applause and his whole committee. Thank you. And now on to the reports quickly. ASUO report, Ben Eckstein.
So my report really is quick, especially because I know the reports after mine are important and I want to hear those. So I just have two updates, and one, and this is somewhat off the cuff, but I've thought all day about the importance of talking about this and providing reassurance. I am fully aware and understand that for any of you who follow the media, it seems as though the ASUO right now has been experiencing some turmoil, and that our election process has been compromised. And I don't mean to diminish the seriousness of any of the incidents over the past few days, but what I do want to say, as the student body president, one of my constitutional duties, one of the first among them, is to be the chief executive officer of the ASUO, and I want this body and the entire campus community to know and to believe me when I say that the ASUO is and has been for a very long time one of the most autonomous, effective, and active student governments in the country, and professional student governments, and that has not changed. The work of the association in representing students, in operating on a day-to-day basis, in ensuring that students are being heard on this campus and represented in decisions that affect us, has not skipped a beat at all. We have had an issue with our election process, several issues, and we have, believe me, me, just as the University Senate, just as our administration, just as every part of this campus does, we have systems and processes in place that are long-standing and have been around and tested in the past to handle those kinds of concerns and situations. And the wheels have been spinning, and there has been movement toward resolutions and so on. All the issues you might have read about, I mean, I'm sure you can understand, don't believe everything you read in the media, because that might not be the most accurate source of what's happening in the ASUO. In fact, I can assure you it's not. But there have been problems, there have been concerns, and they have been dealt with in a very timely fashion every time they've come up. And the student leadership of the ASUO is very competent and has made sure to handle them effectively as best we can. And I do not believe that the autonomy or the integrity of the ASUO as a whole has been compromised, regardless of how some of these incidents reflect right now in this moment on what's happening. So I'm happy to answer questions about that, but I very much wanted to reassure everybody in this room as leaders on campus, as the student body president, that we have a very well-functioning Associated Students that is working hard for students and is resolving the issues that have come up. And it's not the first or the last time in history that the ASUO has encountered these issues, not the first or last time that the university or the university senate or any other group on campus has had to encounter an unexpected issue like this. So I wanted to make that clear. I think it's really important right now that everybody gets that message. And the only other update I had, and this is more of just an update, is that we had been working for months to resolve some issues we had with our overhead assessment rate. The ASUO had been overcharged this year on the overhead assessment rate that the university charges our student fee dollars, and we found out that overcharge amounted to more than $100,000, and over the course of the last couple of months had been advocating strongly that overcharge be returned to students and to the ASUO where it belongs. And earlier this week it was confirmed to us that the Division of Finance and Administration will be correcting that overcharge, and those funds will be returned to the ASUO, and students will decide how to spend those savings. So that was a very positive development for our organization, even amid all the chaos. So just further proof that the wheels are still turning and work is still being done. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please also feel free to contact me outside of the Senate meeting at my email address, asuopres@uoregon.edu, or give me a call. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ben. And next on our agenda is the Respectful Workplace Ad Hoc Committee report. Emilio Hernandez, Chair.
This will be short as well, short as me here. Now, the key word here is ad hoc committee. So we already covered the committee part, but this is ad hoc committee. This ad hoc committee was brought together last year after a discussion that the Senate had in regards to a respectful workplace on campus, which was on the tail end of the letter that Linda King's office sends out yearly. The discussion was based more on the fact that we needed to have more done besides just the letter that goes out. So the ad hoc committee was appointed by the executive committee, and the members are from various components of the campus: classified, ASU president, Ben, Dave Hubin, Theodore Thompson from classified staff, Hernandez Calso, instructor, Carl McNally, classified staff, Terry Miner-Enger, Office of Administration, and Chris Prosser, U.S. Senate Executive Coordinator, and then myself. What we're looking at is we started with reviewing the presentations that Linda King and the Human Resource Office did with OAs, and then Andy Bentz did as well with OAs and classified staff around issues that were being seen and voiced in different work sites on campus, and how those things were being resolved or not being resolved. So we've been looking at different solutions, and today we met with Jamie Moffitt, Carla McNally, Dave Hubin, and President Robert Cure, we met with her today, and what we're talking about at this point is looking at different options of how we can develop this into something that we can work with on campus to develop it further than simply a letter that goes out at the beginning of every year. We have several options out on the table that we're looking at. One of them is an ombudsman, which we had years ago when Dave Hubin and I had color in our hair. And so that's just one of the options, and that's all on the website that you can look at. I don't want to go through all of that with you, but that's one of the options we're looking at. And talking with Jamie today, we are going to cover some other issues with Annie and with Linda in regards to looking at different steps that can be taken versus just these big steps that get us into a situation where people don't feel comfortable with what they're getting, animosity develops, and nothing else is resolved. And so we will be looking at that process over the next couple of months. Jamie has a meeting in 4 months. In about 4 months, she'll be wrapping up her work with Annie and Linda. Our committee will then meet with them and see what comes out of that. So hopefully over the summer, we will have something that we can put together and bring back to the Senate in a more of a formal format so that it can be looked at and discussed. Any questions? Thank you.
I'd just like to say a very special thank you to this entire committee. They've worked so hard. They started in the summer and have met continually throughout the year and are dealing with some really difficult issues on our campus and ones that actually are being considered throughout the country now. It's a really important issue of respectful workplace. And I think they've taken it on in a way that has real integrity and really goodwill. We had a great meeting today with Jamie Moffett, and I see some great possibility for progress. So this is all good news. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. I think they deserve a hand. Let's give them a hand. Thank you very much. I'm just going to say some very quick words about the Achievement Compact Subcommittee. I made a testimony before the committee, and what I said was simply this, that we really want to work with them in order to formulate the most effective achievement compacts possible, and we're ready, the Senate and those of us of all constituencies, to work as appropriate in this regard. And we also offered to host, if the OEIB and if OUS wanted, a gathering of all 7 campuses, delegates who would come here, or perhaps it would be decided that it be held elsewhere, but at least we would start this initiative to bring faculty from all the campuses together to discuss this, because we haven't really heard from the faculty about achievement compacts, how it affects their lives, the lives of students, from their point of view, what is really needed. So I wanted to put that testimony before the subcommittee so that they could keep it as a point of order for the future in the second and third year when the first year will be evaluated and it will be needed to get more input. So that's on the table. And then the IFS and OUS Leadership Caucus report is just to say we will be having the first ever joint meeting on June 8th and 9th of the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate and the OUS Senate leaderships from all the campuses. And that was something that we initiated here. From our perspective, I took the message up to the IFS. They approved it unanimously, and this is a great step forward. It means that that healing process that we had all hoped for in November is now a reality. It's really going forward in a way that we can be proud of, and we're a major part of that. We're taking initiative in that to try to dispel some of those, let's say, I would say rumors about the past where we were not seen maybe as being the best players in the system, but in fact, we're really very much a constructive part of the efforts to go forward. And that's very exciting to me. And to be at a table with faculty and Senate leadership from all of the campuses and to really experience a sense of goodwill and wanting to work together, I have to say it's really the first time I've seen that in quite this way in the 21 years that I've been at the university. It's a real cause for hope. So proceeding quickly to the next set of items, today we have a concern regarding changes to the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence that will be presented by UO Truth Coalition, Rina Sundahl, Diana Salazar, and Tania Sarabia.
We have these documents to pass out, but we only have 20 copies, so I guess just take one, pass it down, maybe share. Thank you.
So hi everyone, thank you for allowing us to come. My name is Diana Salazar.
My name's Rina Sundahl.
My name is Tania Sarabia.
So we are here on behalf of UO Truth Coalition, and UO Truth Coalition is a group of students and community members and alumni that formed in response to the restructuring of OMAS, which Office of Multicultural Academic Success, to CMA, Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence, and we're just going to call it OMAS/CMA. So when we found out about this restructuring, we did a little bit of research, and we found out that OMAS used to be OMA, so it's Office of Multicultural Affairs, which then used to be called CME, which is Council for Minority Education, that was formed here, then called University Assembly. So we are just here to let you all know that there's some changes going on, and we want to come to see if we can have your support for the students to talk to administration and see the restructuring process and see if we can have a voice in this restructuring process, because I mean the services are going to be for students, and so I feel that we should have to say at what these services are going to be changed to, if at all.
Right, so to reiterate kind of what we want is the University Senate's support in ensuring that there's adequate Senate representation as well as student representation in the structuring, because we're concerned that there was no consultation with the University Senate, even though it was originally mandated by the University Senate. And so right now, with the administration's approval, we have put together a student committee, I think of 12 students and a community member and an alumnus. And so we would like specifically your support in working with us on this committee and ensuring that the committee actually has some influence, because right now we have gotten no assurances about what influence this committee is actually going to have over the structuring of the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence, or if it's just going to be a voice that's disregarded. So yeah, I think that's it. I think we're just asking for support, whatever we can figure out specifically what the details of that would be.
Just quickly emphasizing that this is being put into place without student voice, and that's our main goal as U of O Truth Coalition, is to have these voices heard, and by having this committee, we really want those in place of the development of CMA/OMAS to really make this CMA work as best as they can, because if their services are for students, I believe that this committee, made up of mostly students, should be in place immediately.
I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that concern to us. I had mentioned to them that we were going to look into forming a working group from the Senate side to be able to work effectively, to look into this, and to work together in ways that will be appropriate and will be helpful. And I'm going to take that to the Senate Executive Committee because I, of course, would not act unilaterally on this, but we'll discuss it in the Executive Committee and be in touch very soon. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Really appreciate that. And next we have a motion regarding student athletes and sports scheduling. Ben DeJarnett, student athlete.
Yeah, I think I'll be really quick, but I'll throw it on the agenda so that you know. So student
that A, they're missing too much class time, and B, when they miss class time, that they're finding some professors unwilling to help them make up the work that they're missing. So I'm in the process of drafting a policy that would deal with both of those issues, but I don't want to go into details until I've vetted it through the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee, and we'll come back at the next meeting. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your bringing that to us, and I think this just shows how well our system of shared governance is working, that if you look at the agenda today, the concerns of all of our constituencies have been represented in one way or another on important issues. It's very exciting. The final point is a motion regarding shared governance and job postings. Frank Stahl, Professor Emeritus, Biology.
At the last Senate meeting, I gave notice of motion that I wanted the Senate or the faculty at large to be able to make appraisals of the jobs that our administrative officials were doing. I've dropped that for two reasons. One, I think U of O Matters is handling that. UO Matters is handling just fine, drawing attention to shortcomings in some administrative activities, relieving us of that burden. Secondly, it was brought to my attention that it's not really fair to criticize somebody for not doing a job if that job isn't part of their job description. Now, I was personally annoyed that there seemed to be people working in Johnson Hall who are unaware that the University of Oregon has a constitution. And I was annoyed because they seemed to be carrying out their jobs as if the Constitution didn't exist. Hence, the motion I will bring next time is a motion to put on the job description and advertisements, drawing attention to applicants and present holders of those jobs, the importance of the U of O Constitution in the governance of the University of Oregon.
Third. Yes. Yes, please.
Anyone who's interested in writing a proposed resolution for consideration at next month's Senate meeting or whenever we can get in the deadline to request the administration withdraw its objections to the proposed faculty union bargaining unit from the Oregon Employment Relations Board, please contact me so we can get to work on it and get the administration back to a neutral stance on this issue.
Thank you for your announcement. Great. Look at this. We had so much to do. We've gone so far. What a journey today. And it's 5 minutes to 5. What do you say about that? Thank you all so much for a great meeting. Looking forward to our 2 meetings in May where we will be considering all the policies that are before us. We have 5 more to get through this year. Thank you so much.